Today's story 3 is something that you can't imagine because of what this person goes through. And well, you can't really make this up because it's one of the most helpless situations a person could ever go through. But before we begin, if true crime stories intrigues your interest, then I would highly suggest you subscribe to our YouTube channel, as that's all I do and I upload once a week. But with all that being said, let's begin. On November 13th, 1985, the volcano of Nevado del Ruiz erupted at 9:09 p.m. of that evening, and quickly pyroclastic flow, which is the smoke that you can see coming out from the volcano when it erupts, began to melt the mountain ice caps. A pyroclastic flow is a fast-moving current of hot gas and volcanic matter that flows along the ground away from the volcano. Typically, you can expect this gas shooting towards you around about 100 kilometers per hour, but is very capable of going up to 700 kilometers per hour. And it's not just some white cloud that only impairs your vision. It's worse than that. Once this smoke hits you, not only will it make you blind, it would also burn you alive. And this would only take a matter of seconds, because these clouds can reach a staggering temperature of about 1,000 degrees Celsius or 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But anyways, once these ice caps begins to melt, it would slowly begin to create these massive mud waves, or lahars for a better use of words. These waves would head their way into the river valley below, which only intensifies the oncoming flood, traveling about 13 miles per hour or 22 kilometers per hour. The first wave of water would completely engulf a neighboring town called Amario. Amario was a small town hosting about 12,000 people, and it was located in Colombia. And again, it was known to be a small town, but it was a very lively one. But on this day, around about 2,000 people's lives would be taken away from them because of this flood. But it wouldn't stop there though. There would be another flood that would kill over 1,800 people in a nearby town called Chincina. Altogether, about 13 villages were destroyed, including Amario, and around about 23,000 people were killed. 1 to 2 days later, a French journalist by the name of Frank Fournier arrived at the small town of Amario, and by the time he got there, the full town was completely destroyed. He got the news that the massive eruption happened, and so he would make his way down to Amario to spread awareness by taking some photos and getting some interviews. And also along with that, since he would be there, he would try to help some other locals out. So as he got to this now non-existent village, he could see that there's just water everywhere, accompanied with many broken buildings. And as he began to kind of explore the village more, he would notice that it's pretty hard to move around due to the mud and the water that mixed together. And this mud and water, once mixed together, would almost create like a quicksand effect, because if you kept your foot long enough in this new special mud, you could feel your foot sinking. But anyways, as Fournier began to make his way through the village slowly, a village farmer would hail at Fournier to come and help him. Fournier would shout over to him to ask him, "What's up? What's the problem?" But the villager wouldn't even respond to that. He would just run away. So of course, intrigued, Fournier would follow the villager through the thick mud, and eventually, what felt like ages again due to the mud, they would arrive at the scene. And once Fournier saw this scene, actually kind of tear up, because there was a 13-year-old girl named Omira Sanchez, and while she was buried neck up in debris and muddy water, the farmer would tell Fournier that she had been stuck here for about 3 days, and many rescue workers attempted to save her life, but unfortunately they were unable to pull her out from the debris. Once they were trying to pull her out from the debris, they would discover something that was truly haunting. They would discover that her leg was trapped on a brick door, along with her aunt's arm, who was now deceased. By the time Fournier had arrived, she was drifting in and out of consciousness, because as now she has been exposed to the elements for 3 days. Fournier would try to help, but unfortunately would be unsuccessful. So the only thing that Fournier could do was to stay by her side and would try his best to comfort her. One of the saddest parts about this whole story was when she would tell Fournier that she was worried about missing school, and would even ask Fournier if he could take her to school, not knowing that her school is fully destroyed, and also the fact that she's probably going to die here. Fournier sat next to her for 3 hours and would capture her final moments in a series of heart-wrenching images. This was to let the world know what she was going through and other villagers were going through as well. And eventually, once knowing her situation, she would ask the volunteers around her to let her rest and to leave her alone. And once she was ready, she would say adios to her mother, who was underwater, deceased, and she would pass away. Fournier, who was beginning to cry at this point, would walk away and continue his journey, knowing that there was nothing that he could have done for that girl. And at the end, he would say in a heart-wrenching statement, "When I took the picture of her, I felt completely powerless, especially in front of a little girl who was facing death with courage and dignity." Our second story takes us to China, and well, as you know, China is known for its massive industrial side, and how many things that me and you use on a daily basis comes from China. But did you know in China there are hundreds of these areas which are protected by the Chinese government? And why? Because they're actually home to Siberian tigers, and in some cases these areas have been turned into local parks so that the local tourists can visit them and visit the animals. And one of these parks was named the Battling Wildlife World Animal Park. And this was not some normal park where you could just walk around freely and see all the animals with the comfort of a cage in front of you and them. Nope, this park was actually the complete opposite. The park would actually let the animals walk around freely, but you as the guest would have the luxury of staying in your own car and would drive around the tiger enclosure, this while being completely unsupervised by people, despite having literally no security. Well, a bit anyways. The park did have this one very strict rule that, if broken, could lead to a lot of problems. What was that rule? There was do not leave your car or do not roll your windows down whatsoever. That was once you were inside the enclosure. That rule was there not only to keep the customers safe, but to also make sure that the little security that they did have didn't have to go into the enclosure. In the summer of 2016, a husband, his wife, and his young daughter, along with her grandmother, decided that we wanted to go to this park. So after paying for an unguided tour, the gates would open up for the family and they would roll into the tiger enclosure. The family in the white sedan was having an amazing time until the wife in the front passenger seat claimed that she was car sick. So in a reaction, her husband would slow the car down until he got to a complete stop, and without really warning anyone, she would promptly jump out of the car. What would happen next once she actually jumped out of the car is actually pretty scary, and it's actually on YouTube. But for YouTube purposes, I can't really show you the full video, but I can show you little screenshots here and there. But if you're really curious, you should be able to find it. After getting out of the car, the woman shuts the door and walks over to her husband's side until she's right in front of the driver's side door. And well, as she was making her way, her husband would roll down the window to communicate with her. And as right as the wife leans over to talk to her husband, a Siberian tiger comes running out from the forest, lunges towards the car, and then grabs onto her. And once the tiger had a good grip, he would pull her all the way into the forest. The husband would immediately leap out from the car, but would hesitate for a second because he would see that the grandmother also leaped out from the car as well. So once both of them were on the pavement, they would shut the doors behind them, and then the two would run into the forest. And once they did, a gruesome scene would unfold. Once the two ran into the forest, another tiger that was drawn to the commotion and also the smell of blood would attack the grandmother, but unlike the wife, she would actually die instantly. The wife would survive the attack but would suffer serious injuries, and as far as the husband, he would escape with minor injuries. After this attack, the battling park would be forced to put up even more signs on either end of this driving tour to make it very, very clear to anyone that was going through this park to not leave your car, and to also keep all your windows up, because even though this park was filled with these amazing creatures, they were not safe for humans. Francois Gillet was an Australian-born French tailor who was well known during his time for inventions, but this one specific invention would change everything for Franz. Franz was born on the 16th of October 1878 in Austria-Hungary. His parents, Joseph Rochlet and his mother, Katharina, were loving parents that just genuinely adored their child. And one of the main reasons was because he was just so creative. He would do things and make things that no other normal child would do. But in 1898, he would move to Paris, France, and in just about 10 years he would obtain his French nationality, and it would be here in France where he began to invent a lot of new things. Well, when I mean new things, I mean just different types of parachutes. And from July of 1910, he would begin to develop his biggest invention, the parachute suit. A suit that was not much more bulkier than a normal one, but this suit would have a few additional extra rods and canopies, and just a small amount of rubber that would actually let the parachute fly out. Franz's goal was the invention being very practical, but being very efficient at the same time, because for his entire life, Franz craved efficiency. Anything that he would do it in the most efficient way possible. But during his time making his masterful product, many other inventors had made a similar thing. A man by the name of Louis Sebastian and another man called Jean-Pierre had successfully used a fixed canopy parachute, which meant that the parachute wings were already open. And also they would go up to fairly different heights and demonstrate that their product could work. But there was only one problem for these parachutes. The maximum height that you could take them up wasn't high enough for the likes of pilots, who sometimes needed to jump out of a plane and obviously didn't have a parachute. And this was slowly becoming to a real big hazard as more and more pilots found themselves stuck in a situation where they needed to abort their plane but had no other option but to go down with the plane. and Franz knew that, hence why he needed his parachutes to be foldable. During his early stages of his parachutes, he would make many different prototypes that were just quite unsuccessful. He would test these prototypes by strapping the actual parachute to a mannequin and then throw that mannequin off a high building, until one prototype would actually kind of work. And also during this time, there was a competition going on that would be held by the Aero Club de France for the best parachute, basically. So once Franz heard about this competition, he would retweak his design, because one of the main requirements for this competition was the parachute could not weigh more than 25 kg or 55 pounds. So again, he would refine his parachute by increasing the surface area and also reducing the weight. But doing this would kind of cause his parachute to become into a fail again. When he went out and tested this parachute on his dummy, he would notice that his dummies were falling way too fast. But Franz, instead of, figuring something out, trying to fix this problem, he would begin to make excuses and would actually stick with that design. It was reported that Franz actually used the parachute on himself and jumped from a height of 8 to 10 meters, which was around about 26 to 33 feet. Once he actually used the parachute and landed on the floor, he would break his own leg. And once this whole ordeal happened, this would open Franz's eyes that yes, his parachute wasn't good at all and he needed to retweak it once again. But even after retweaking it once again, he would still notice that his parachute was way too heavy. But either way, he would continue to do these tests on his parachutes and would eventually tweak his parachute to be perfect for him. And this time for his experiment, he would actually move on to a very famous building called the Eiffel Tower. He of course wouldn't just do this without asking permission. He obviously got permission. And after a while again, he finally thought that he got the parachute down. And so again, after getting permission, on Sunday the 4th of February around about 7 AM for his final test, Franz and his two friends would get out of their car and spectators would hear about this final test and would arrive at the Eiffel Tower to see what was going on. And they would actually see the parachute and saw that it just looked like normal clothing, but also saw that the suit seemed very loose. But either way, Franz would walk past the police, who were also here to watch this experiment. Franz, without his two friends, would climb to one of the main decks of the Eiffel Tower, which was like the first floor. And also to give you a bit of context on how high this main deck was, it was about 137 meters high, or about 449 feet in the air. So again, it was no joke, it was really high. So once Franz got to the first floor, he would walk to the edge of this main deck and he would look down and he would get ready to throw his dummy off the main deck. But there was just one thing, there was no test dummy that was going to be used. Franz had volunteered himself as the test dummy. So as Franz begins to look down, his heart begins to race because there was a bit of doubt in his mind. But either way, he wasn't chickening out now. It came so far and he had real faith in his product. So again, Franz took one step back and then would proceed to jump off. And onlookers that were looking from down below could instantly see that he was coming down way too fast. And on top of all that, Franz's parachute would fail to deploy, causing Franz to land straight on the concrete. He would die straight away and, well, would be known as one of the most horrific experiments gone wrong. So that'll be it for today's video. If true crime stories intrigues your interest, then I would highly suggest you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as that's all I do and I upload once a week. But with all that being said, I thank you for watching and yeah, goodbye.